Well, for this multimedia cast that I did with Johnnie Crawford, I just want to say it was really interesting talking to him. I've had a lot of interesting conversations with John. He's really a good guy, very knowledgeable, very, very humorous. And I really recommend strongly that you check out both his personal website, which I'll list, and his Instagram page, which is also in the notes. And if you are interested in studying with him, learning from him, getting in a group or a tutorial, he's very busy getting those class options going. So I really recommend that you talk to him and check that. I think you'll be doing yourself a service. He's got years and years of experience and just a really unique and creative eye. So on that note, we'll go ahead with the full program. So thanks for tuning in to A.Connector, and I hope you enjoy. Bye now. You're listening to the A.Connector podcast with host Mark Foreman. Let's get connecting. Yeah. Okay, so here we are. This is A Connector podcast with host Mark Foreman, and I'm talking to my mate down in the Southern Hemisphere, down in New Zealand, as a matter of fact, and this is John Crawford. How you doing today, John?
I'm not doing too bad, thanks, Mark.
Well, that's good to know. So what could make it better? If you're not doing too bad, there's got to be something that would make it even better. What would that be, John?
If the sun came out and the wind stopped blowing, it's pretty simple.
So you're going through winter down there.
Roger that. Yeah, it's sort of winter's petering away, but it's sort of taking longer than normal to peter. But so Wellington traditionally is very windy, and the cold winds come up from the South Island where the snow is this time of year. So it can get cold and windy, but it never snows in the city. You know, the only snow you get in New Zealand is really in the South Island, plus some of the mountains in the North Island where the skiing and snowboarding goes on. But yeah, Wellington's always got a nice freshness to the air, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. So, you've been living in Wellington your whole life?
No, I was born the other side of the island, in a little place called Napier, and then I went to the other side of the island again, the west coast, by a big mountain called Mount Taranaki, and I went to school there and went to boarding school, and they tried to get me into shape, and it never worked. But yep. I've been around a bit, different parts of the country.
Okay. And so for those of us that have never visited New Zealand, I mean, obviously a lot of us know New Zealand through some really big hit movies like The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, etc. We do know it's a very beautiful country. So are some of the movies I'm talking about, were those done on the North Island or North and South Island, or?
Well, because New Zealand is fairly sparsely populated, like I think there's 6 million people now. There's lots of beautiful country where there's no people, and there's big valleys and rivers and lakes, and so there's a multitude of options for the movie makers, which is why a lot of movie making is done in New Zealand. But of course that's changed now because of the coronavirus, because
right,
we can travel a lot harder, and the quarantine, they're creating restrictions for people coming and going. Everything's changed, including the film industry.
Mm-hmm. So, speaking of coronavirus, I mean, hasn't New Zealand been on lockdown for a while now, or what is the current status?
We got to the bottom end of lockdown after not having any community cases for just over 100 days, and then boom, it started sneaking back again because people got a bit complacent. But we're back on track now, and the last 3 days there's been no community cases, but there's still cases that have been picked up at the border, of course, which is a good thing. But everyone's on tenterhooks. Having said that, I've said everyone, but some people are still blasé, as I'm sure they are in America. But boy, it's still pretty scary stuff, and it's something that is going to be with us for a while, I'm sure. It's just a matter of adapting. If you don't adapt, you die.
Right.
You've got to adapt your way you think as a business person, and a lot of businesses are suffering. My commissioned photography work's dropped right off.
Yeah.
But luckily I can still play around with my iPhone and get and shoot all my personal stuff, which is my passion.
Sure. And we're going to get to that in just a second. Actually, I have a friend that just got back to Taiwan. He's a private pilot. He's got a client here that he works for exclusively. And during, I'd say, most of the last half a year, he's been back in New Zealand, partially under lockdown, and here in Taiwan too. I think if you leave the country, once you come back, it's like mandatory 2-week quarantine. So it's been kind of tricky for everybody. And he just got back. Yeah. So
my daughter came back from New York and she had to do the 14 days and she hated it, but she was blown away by how easy it is here compared to America. Anyway, let's not waste too much time on the coronavirus, but it is there and it's something we need to be pretty smart about.
Right. Well, speaking of not wasting time on the coronavirus and getting to something more of interest to our listeners and both you and myself, why don't we talk about some of your photography, and in specific, I know you're very, very active over on Instagram, which is how I found out about you. And I believe your Instagram handle is Johnnie Craw. I will put that in notes, but it's JOHNNIECRAW. Is that correct?
That Johnnie Craw, yeah.
Right, so that's short for your actual name, which is John Crawford, and we'll put that in the notes. Okay, so John, what I'd really like is, you've got so many really powerful images and some with really great stories to go with them, and I think that's what really kind of got you on my radar, is because so many photographers like to express themselves mostly through the images, and then other people maybe like to express themselves mostly through words, and you seem fairly adept at doing both. So I think that's something that has appealed to me, and I think probably a lot of other people. So I think, if you don't mind, I know there's one image I've looked at before, and you've got a great story that goes with that. There's an image of a bloke named Hori.
That's right.
Would you tell us a little? Yeah.
Just before I touch on Hori, I just want to go back to your comment about the words versus the photograph.
Okay.
I've sort of reached a point now where I think obviously a photograph is a lot more easy to understand if it's got a story, particularly of people. I mean, everyone's got a story to tell, and it's, I like to get an image that will stand out by itself, and also a story that will stand out by itself, but together they go hand in hand, and one supports the other. So, Hori, I photographed him first met him about 4 years ago on the street in Auckland. It was part of a series I did on the homeless that survived in the streets of Auckland, living outside and getting by, summer and winter, sleeping in doorways and sitting on the pavement and, getting, with a hand out for coins and food. And, I decided to do a series of portraits of these guys, which sort of started as a seed and grew into a big tree and became an exhibition. And the exhibition, we raised $87,000, which was all gifted to the charity.
Oh, that's
support. Good. But, and all these guys have got stories. But Hori, he's got a great story because, he lives in the bush. He lives in the bush in a little hut, and about 2 hours north of Auckland, and he survives, getting water from the streams, lives off the land. He catches eels and mullet and rabbits and shoots deer, and he says his best friends are the kururu, which is a native wood pigeon.
Okay.
And he's just, he looks menacing, but he's a real gentle soul, a lovely spirit. But, the only way you find out about these people is to spend the time and sit and talk with them. And, once you get their confidence and they start talking, it's just awesome what you find out. Well, you don't find anything out in life if you don't talk to people.
Right.
Talking's a skill, but the biggest skill is actually listening to what people are saying.
Mm-hmm.
But Hori's a joy.
So let me just see if I've got this straight. So for this kind of a series, I don't think you're doing this purely candid. I think you're probably talking to these people and explaining what you're doing and why you're doing it, and seeing if they're comfortable to pose for you. Is that how you're setting up these shots?
first, and then, like in this particular series, once you've got one in the bag, and once you've got a few images on your phone, you can show people. I'd sit and chat and say, I'd start the conversation, particularly with Hori. I'd say, hey man, I really love your tattoos. I'm doing a series of photographs on people I meet on the streets with tattoos. Can we have a chat? And most people are keen to talk, and you chat away, and the conversation doesn't stop. And then I say, hey, listen, can we get your picture? Do you want to do it now, or do you want to meet me later in the day, or what's best for you? So it's not too forced. You give them an option. And I had a few spots in the city that I take people to, which is really close to the main street. It's just down little side lanes where the light's very unflattering, and it's sort of dark and grungy, which sort of suits the type of portrait I'm after. And it does become very contrived. And as you can see from my portraits, I don't get people to smile. I just like them looking at camera very comfortably and calmly, and I take lots of shots, and then I just, we talk more, and that's it. And I show them what we've got. When you're going, when you're shooting, if you can show people what you're doing, it just brings them even more. It makes it become, they become part of the process.
Right. They take more ownership of the process.
That's right, and you can get their opinion. You say, hey, what do you think of this? And then, not in this case, but quite a few of the street people I photographed have got big body tattoos, and I say, listen, we'll just shoot the first shot, which like I've got of Hori, and then I say, listen, have you got any other tattoos on your chest under your shirt? And they say, yeah, man. And I say, are you cool? Can we have a look at that? In fact, how about you mind taking your shirt off? And it might be the middle of winter and bloody freezing cold.
Geez.
I'm dressed up with a beanie and a hoodie on. And they say, sure, man, because they love to show them.
Right.
Most people who have got tattoos, they love people to acknowledge them.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got some of these big, tough, bloody gang members that have spent years in prison, down to these shorts and no shirt on, and they suddenly become very humble, and you see the real person, because they're not covered by shirts or leather jackets or chains or. I shouldn't say chain, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, and they're also reconnecting to the story behind each one of them, and kind of actually going back within themselves to that point in time, or and really connecting with the whole reason they had that tattoo in the first place.
That's right, and when you get someone down just to bare chested, you're seeing the person as they are. They're hiding nothing, and they tend to let more out, and it becomes more real. And I take a lot of attention to the way the person's looking at the camera with their eyes, because the eyes tell the stories as well.
Right.
So it gets the imagination going.
Just out of curiosity, let's say, like in the case of Hori, and I realize it's approximate, how many shots of him do you think you took, and that you ended up selecting this one? I mean, 10, 20, more?
I'd take up to 100 shots pretty quickly.
Really? Mm-hmm.
I'd take half a dozen of the one angle, then I shift them around a bit to profile, and I might move them down the wall a bit to get a bit of a grungier light, or I might take them somewhere else. But quite often you've only got a minute, because people don't want to hang around.
Right.
But, with Hori, he gave me the privilege of time.
Cool. So,
and I photographed him a few times after that. Quite a few of the people I photograph I see on the street, so I'll talk to them again and shoot some more pics, because I live and breathe photography.
Right. So this shot of Hori, and I think most of your work on Instagram are done exclusively with an iPhone camera. Is that correct, John?
Yes. And just one more point before that. Hori's real name, because he's a local boy, he's a Māori. His real name is Hori Winiata Hui Te Heri Heri Haringai Haramui Kuri.
Wow.
So
that's a mouthful.
Good luck with that one.
Do you know what it means?
No, it's just a number of names that he's been given by his family.
Okay.
Each of his names comes from his ancestors, going right back to his great-great-grandfather.
I see.
So each name has a connection.
Sure.
Anyway, sorry, I went off course a bit there, mate.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, but,
Interesting too, because here in Taiwan and also in Hawaii, because here in Taiwan there's a number of different indigenous tribes with ties to the Maori as well. And also that being said, the Hawaiians also have ties with the Maori and also have ties with the indigenous tribes in Taiwan. So even when you were saying the Maori names, it kind of had almost like that Polynesian kind of multisyllabic sound and flow to them. So just an observation on my part.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Please continue.
So what was your question, Mark? Sorry, I lost it.
Yeah, that's okay. Originally, I was asking you about how many photos you took, and then I mentioned that I was just double checking that you're shooting primarily with an iPhone camera these days.
Yep. Yeah, I shoot everything on the iPhone. I shoot almost exclusively using Hipstamatic, which I love because it gives it that different look right from the start.
Mm-hmm.
And and then I play with the images quite a bit using Snapseed.
Okay.
And you see that pretty much I shoot everything in a square because I've been around a while and I shot a lot of stuff all my life as a corporate photographer working for all sorts of different clients here and internationally. And over a working career, you always shoot on a with a rectangular format, like on a 35mm format or medium format, which is 6x7. So it's all within a rectangle. So shooting within a square gives you a different mindset.
Yeah, it does.
It's quite different to composing in a rectangle, and I like the freshness of that. So pretty much everything I post, although it's changing a wee bit, most of the stuff I post is in a square, and I shoot it in a square. And I try and get everything in camera, so I don't have to crop anything afterwards.
What size film camera is shot in square, or is it a crop off of medium format?
Film cameras you can get square back 6x6, or you can get 6x7 backs, or some are purpose-built to be one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Plus you can get landscape formats, but the traditional 35mm format, 24 to 36 centimeters, that's your typical landscape proportion.
Right, right.
So a square is lovely. I like squares.
Yeah, no, it presents well, and I think that's one reason too why your photographs. I hadn't thought about it before, but now that you mention it, it's kind of okay. Especially in the portrait work, it just frames it so well. I mean, it's like nothing but the meat, nothing wasted, no excess. It's just the key information.
Yeah, it's different compositional aspects too, because the two lines between the two corners are equal length.
Right.
And they meet bang in the middle. Whereas if you're shooting a rectangle, it's a different mindset.
Yeah.
But the iPhone and Hipstamatic is fantastic. And as you know, Hipstamatic has got all sorts of options in film and lenses, and it's so confusing because the reason that people shoot on the iPhone and love it is it's so simple. But the minute you start getting involved with choosing different, well, they call it lens and film options, but it's all just applications. But it becomes complicated. So I've just narrowed it down to one film and one lens now. So I flick into Hipstamatic and boom, I'm away without thinking, because it's spontaneous. And another cool thing about the camera, shooting on the iPhone, is it's less intrusive when you're shooting portraits.
Yes.
It's not intrusive because people take to a phone.
I agree with you. That's been my experience. I should mention a mutual friend of ours, Eric Mencher. What kind of got me into this new mindset and this new standard operating procedure of using iPhone only was when I was looking at his images and realizing that from whatever point he decided he was going to be shooting only with the iPhone, and realizing, wow, he's got some amazing images, as do you. And so that was like, well, okay, because I always struggled with it. I mean, it's like I was comfortable working with the DSLR, and I would take some shots with the phone, but always kind of like, well, this is kind of like, it's good for when you don't have anything, but because the form factor was more of a challenge than with a proper camera, for lack of better words. And then once I saw what you guys were doing, and I started working with it, I said, okay, I'm determined. I'm going to conquer the form factor, and just have it become my primary camera. And I'm at a point now where I'm really loving that and experiencing an ease of doing it.
Yeah, I think ease of doing it is the is the catch point, because it is easy. You pull it out of your pocket and boom, you're away shooting. I mean, I was built up in the film days where you'd have a couple of camera bodies, half a dozen lenses, tripod lights, and it was just it's no good for your back, no good for your shoulder. But the iPhone's it's fantastic, and I'm lucky to have been getting a few corporate commission jobs to shoot annual reports and stuff, actually shooting on the iPhone rather than my big cameras, and that just gives you so much more freedom.
Yeah, and that's noteworthy too. I mean, to see that the iPhone is actually at a point where people are able to accept it for.
There's nothing wrong with the quality as long as you choose the right conditions to shoot, and that's the trick. I mean, like if you try and shoot in very low light or very harsh light, you can have problems. Although with the new iPhone, I can only relate to iPhones, but with the new iPhones, they are getting better for latitude and light and dark areas, which traditionally will have problems with digital. But I love the iPhone.
Well, one comment I'd like to make on this image, this image of Hori, is that just with the square framing, the square crop, and the textures, the blend of his hair, the tattoos on his face, the clothing he's wearing, and then the wall behind him. I mean, this is like a really texture-rich image, and interestingly enough, they're kind of complementary to each other, which is no mean feat. So I think you sense that when you're setting up the image that there's something, it's all working together. And
well, the trick is obviously, as any photographer should know, is that the background shouldn't take away from the subject. There's got to be it's got to be there. But obviously, when you look at Hori, you go straight to his face because he's got such a strong face, and that particular wall that he's leaning against, another 2 feet along, it's quite different again. So there's everywhere you look, there's places to take photographs. You find them and say, right, I'm going to bring someone back here.
Right. So Johnny, just for context, I mean, how long have you been shooting photographs for? I mean, when did you start?
When I was a kid, my dad was a doctor, and he had a hobby of taking photographs, and he used to block off the kitchen with black curtaining and get his enlarger out and process the photos and do prints. So I sort of got an understanding of photography way back then. So I've been taking photos all my life,
What was your first camera? Do you remember?
It was an old box Brownie camera.
Sure. Good old Brownie.
Yeah.
Wow. So you've got a few dozen years of photography behind you.
Yeah, man. I got a couple under my belt, and that's definitely my passion, and and as long as it stays that way, I'm going to keep taking photographs. I mean, it's pretty hard to stop me.
Sure. Okay.
I do a lot of walking every day. I walk in and out into town from home, and that's a good hour and a bit walk. So I do that partly for exercise and partly because there's always a good chance I'm going to run into someone or something I want to photograph.
Sure. So it's good for the body, good for the mind, good for the soul, good for the eyes.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
So that's me.
So let's why don't we go to another image? I think you're going to choose the next few images. So one was Hori. Now where are we going? You're going to direct us down your Instagram page. Do you have another image in mind?
There's what looks like a well, it's actually a dead cat, and the cat has probably been dead, I'd say, for 30 years. So it's just a flat, basically mummified cat.
So there's like a mountain in the background behind it.
It's just a hill.
A hill behind it, right? Got it.
Past, and the interesting thing is I found this cat probably 20 years ago, and I'm a big animal lover, so I had to be very careful with my story because people would think that, hey, what a macabre thing, photographing a dead cat. As I described in my story, the spirit's gone, the soul's gone. It's just an abstract form, and because it's so flat, like it must have perished and ended up on a concrete floor of a shower in an old house. So it was dead flat, and over years of decay, gravity took over, and it's become completely flat. So flat you can put a ruler along its body. It's just flat and probably about quarter of an inch thick. So I carried it around in a box for years, waiting for the right opportunity to photograph it. And everyone that saw it said, "My God, what do you keep that thing for?" So every time I go on a roadie, which is quite often, I take something to photograph. And my last trip to Auckland, which was a couple of weeks back, I thought, right, I'll take this cat. So I had it in the boot of the car and took all the back roads, and nothing was planned, but you suddenly see a background that you think, my God, that's going to work. So I waited for an hour for the light to come right, and every time a car drove past, I'd have to hide the cat because it looks a bit weird holding the skeleton of a dead cat up on the side of the road taking a photograph.
A bit, yeah.
So you've got to, be a little bit careful with what you do. But yeah, that's where that story. And I got lucky because of sunlight.
So were you just freehanding both the cat and the iPhone at the same time to get the shot?
Yeah, I was the cat with a tail, and which was completely.
So it's pretty rigid.
But I got lucky with a little patch of sunlight that sort of crossed over the mummified form of the cat, and also cast a little bit of light in the background. But that's one thing about photography that we all know. You're always prepared for the unexpected, and the unexpected might be rays of light, or it might be something in the composition. But as long as you're always prepared for the unexpected, you've always got a good chance of getting photographs that are different, and people say, "My, that's great. How did you do that?"
On that note, how many of your really, really good images would you say was serendipity as opposed to what you set out and hoped for? You follow my question?
Yeah, well, you can put those two cases in different boxes. I mean, you can go out with just sort of thinking, I might find something to photograph today, and you won't, and then suddenly you'll come across something out of the blue, or you'll set up a photograph completely, and all the elements in the photograph you think carefully about when you compose it, and you put the person in just the right spot, and you've got the right props and the right background and the right everything, versus shooting spontaneously and just boom, finding something.
Are you more satisfied by the serendipity ones that you didn't expect but blew you away when they're finished, or are you more satisfied by the ones that you conceived and set up just the way you had envisioned and executed it that way?
Well, it's 50-50, because the ones that just happen before your very eyes when you're least expecting them, they're very spontaneous, and you have a different reaction to something that's spontaneous because you weren't expecting it. Whereas if you set up something yourself, in a way it's contrived, but you shoot it in such a way so it doesn't look contrived.
Right. So that makes me think. It makes me think that a lot of what we call art is really an illusion, or even kind of a trick, because it's something that is contrived, but if it's executed well, it doesn't look contrived. And it doesn't feel contrived.
You can go back to the famous French photographer Henri Cartier-Bresson, and his famous picture of in the 20s of someone leaping over a puddle. The
puddle jumping, yeah.
You know the one.
Sure.
And the heel of their foot is just a millimetre above the surface of the water.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I read about that image recently, and he got the person to jump over that puddle probably 20 times. Well,
sure.
I know that feeling because I do the same with some photographs. I get some poor person I've never met before, and I get them to repeat something over and over and over again until I get it right. Because with the iPhone, there's quite a delay in the shutter speed.
Yes.
And the shutter actually falls, so you miss so many good shots, which you don't miss with a real camera.
And you also get some slightly better ones because of the delay, where it added an interesting element in motion that you had not anticipated, and added something, just another feature that you weren't thinking about, and it's kind of a combination of deliberate and serendipity. So
that's right.
Yeah.
The combo is a good one.
So what part is this? Okay, so this part where you stage the shot, you're saying it's you're gonna have to help me. So these are all Maori words. I think Waitotara Beach. Did I get that close?
Waitotara
Oh,
Beach.
Waitotara Beach.
Which,
Okay.
which one was that? Just direct me to that shot.
This is the
Um,
cat one. The cat one that we're. It says that.
oh, you were that one. You were
Oh, that's where
yeah.
you
Well,
rescued
it's
the
a long story.
mummified cat. That's not where you took the shot.
It's a long story because 20 years ago I used to do a lot of aerial photography work and we used to fly around in helicopters and I knew a few of the pilots and they'd always go out of their way to take me on little joyrides. And we were flying back up the coast and we saw this old house which you couldn't see from the road. And so I got them to fly over it and took a few reference pics. And I went back there a couple of weeks later. That's where I found the cat because the Waitotara Beach is in the middle of nowhere. And a part of the North Island, which is a beautiful part called Taranaki, which is on the wild west coast. That's where I spent a lot of my early days.
Just hearing you talk about, I think most Kiwis I've met just really love their country, and I can see why it's such a beautiful place. And just hearing you talk about it, you could tell there's such a love that you have for the land there.
Yeah, well, mate, every country has its beauty,
Sure.
and everywhere there's beautiful places. You just gotta find them and revel in them and think how lucky you are to have those on your doorstep. But people say, "Oh, you're so lucky you get to go to all these places to take photographs," and I say you can find beautiful photographs everywhere, mate. You just gotta keep your eyes open and look for them.
Exactly. Or conceive them and then bring them about.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
So is there anything else in this image that you care to share with us?
Not really, just that the composition was a bit contrived. I tried to get the elbow of the cat on that hill, but that's something that happens just while you're shooting. You just make it happen.
Your goal was to have the elbow actually resting on the very top of the hill.
Yeah.
Okay, because I was going to say if I was going to critique this, I would say I would let a little bit more light through just to show. But I see where you're going, so I'll just shut up. Okay.
Yeah, every photograph that anyone takes has got a story, and,
sure.
And it's sort of like music. You can go back to music from your early years in life, and they take you back to that stage of your life. The same as photos. You can go back to the moment when you took that photo and you remember everything.
Okay, so
as I said that I've got a terrible memory, but when it comes to photographs, I forget nothing.
Right. Okay, so for the third image, where are we going to be looking at, Johnny? Where are you going to take us?
Well, I'd like for story content, for a bit of humour, which people can learn from humour, but the story's fun. There's an image of a toy handgun, which is
okay, like the fourth row in between the curved sign and the head.
No, it's a couple more down. There's a handgun stuck on a bit of wood with trees behind.
I got it. So we're talking about, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, row 8, the first one on the Instagram page.
Right. You got it. And the story with that is, on that rodeo I decided to take a handgun with me, and it's probably only slightly longer than a cigarette packet, but it's metal, and it's American, and it's a classic 1930s kid's toy.
Mm-hmm.
And I was driving out of Taupo, which is in the sort of middle of the North Island, and it was beautiful fog in the morning, so it was a perfect opportunity. So I was on the main state highway between Auckland and Wellington, which is sort of, part of it goes through forest, and it's very quiet, and there's no one living anywhere near. So I got out of the car with a sort of toy handgun, poked up my stick, and sort of got those trees in the background. While I was doing that, someone must have driven past and seen me doing this and saw the gun, which is not a gun, it's a toy gun.
Right.
But they dialed 111 on your country, or America, it's 999. And 20 minutes later, I was driving north, minding my own business, and I saw these two police cars coming up behind me, so with flashing lights. So I pulled over and waited for them to pass, but they pulled them behind me. 3 more cars arrived. They got out. There were 2 armed defenders squad cars, 7 police. 2 of them were armed. No, 4 of them were armed, and they handcuffed me, searched my car, and found this handgun. And it was as it was happening, I was thinking, this is great for my Instagram story. You know, there was no, I wasn't scared. It was just, oh my God, what's going on here?
How long
So,
did you have to explain to them before they realized that nothing was going on and just let you be?
oh, they let me talk for 10 minutes and they didn't have an ounce of humour.
Of course. Otherwise, why would they become cops?
That's right. It was just a waste of taxpayers' money. I made that point and said, mate, this is a bit of a joke, isn't it? And the guy said, looked me right in the eye and said, it's not a joke. We take every reporting of a handgun as serious. And I said, that's so good. Good on you, mate. Well, it's true. You
Right.
need to.
Right.
Anyway. So yeah.
And it seems cops are the same the whole world round. I mean, you know, it seems it's basically the same personality type, the same attitude, you know, just kind of the you know, the us and them mentality.
Yeah, but mate, I have to say, you know, there's good cops and bad cops.
Sure.
The same as any profession. There's good photographers, there's bad ones, and
Absolutely.
there's the bad ones give the good ones a bad name. So I think most police, or you know, in most countries, are doing the job they have to do, and they do it well. But then there's the idiots that don't, and we've heard about a few of those lately.
Right. You know, the thing I like about this image, okay, as an American, you know, I grew up kind of in the big city back east, but I did spend a fair amount of time in the West. You know, I went to school in Tucson, Arizona, and that's desert, but there's also mountains. So, I mean, it just kind of, I just get the sense of, you know, some Western scene, and I think, you know, without really thinking about it too much, that's just kind of the overall feel. And so it also makes me feel like, you know, maybe I'm back in the 30s or something. So
Yeah.
that's the mood I get, and I like it.
Yeah, because it's got no time. It's timeless.
Yeah.
Because nothing that says when it was taken. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. The timelessness is nice.
Yeah.
But that applies to a lot of photographs too. I mean, you can see a photograph and there's no point of reference that takes you back to an era.
No, I think there's something good about that, because I think the timeless ones are also good for people that maybe don't particularly like photographs or don't normally look at them, but because it has a timeless nature, it's easy for them to engage with it.
Yeah. And I think, you know, as a photographer, it's interesting to show people photographs because, you know, a good photograph will do something in the sense that it'll get people thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone sees different things in images.
Yeah.
You know, we're bombarded in this day and age with you know, everything's visual. There's, you know, photographs we see in magazines and billboards, and everything's pretty and moving very fast, and it's boom, 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 image. So to get people to stop and look at a photograph, there has to be in some way a point of difference.
Right. Good point.
That will grab someone's attention, and it can be any number of things.
Okay.
And what some people will notice, other people won't. So, you know, it's an interesting thing.
I've got a question for you, and it's based off of one of my pet peeves with my photography and people interacting with them, and that is, does it bother you when people are looking at something a little bit abstract and like, well, what is that? You know, what are you trying to say here? What is happening there? I mean, it always drives me crazy because I feel it's like, well, what do you feel? What do you think? Because I don't, you know, maybe I didn't have any idea, and even if I do, it's like, why is my idea more important than yours? Because it's not what I put into it, it's what you're taking away. I mean, so what do you have to say on that?
Well, I don't really, you know, the people say, you know, what's going on in this image, and I say, well, I just like it for this and this and this reason, and I always say to people, listen, with my personal work, my primary objective is to please myself, and if I like the photograph, you know, I like the photograph, otherwise I wouldn't be showing someone. If other people like it, that's great, and if they don't, I'm not offended at all, because
Sure.
you know, I'm not setting out intentionally to please everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm setting out primarily to please myself and to satisfy my own creative juices, or whatever you want to call
Right.
them.
And hypothetically speaking, if I say, oh, Johnny, you know, this image actually gets me sexually aroused, I don't think you're going to be bothered by that. That maybe that's not what you're trying to achieve, but it's like, you know, for me, it's like, hey, if that's what you took away from it, great. And I'm glad it meant something to you. I'm glad you had some, you know, strong feeling, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Because I think everyone can take some ownership. You know, it doesn't have to be all about what I thought and I saw. You know, that's why I like to hear what other people feel.
yeah, and it's always good to get opinions too. I always show images that I'm not sure about to my friends and say, hey, what do you think of this? And most of them just annoy me, so they will say, oh, this is crap, delete it.
Right. Okay. So where are we going to go to the next image?
Well, let's go down a couple. There's
Okay.
it's going to be pretty hard for the listeners to relate to these because we're just describing them. But there's a picture of a Hasidic Jew in New
Okay.
York
I see
past
it.
the window.
He's got a window frame right behind his head.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's a shot where I saw the wall, and I thought, right, and this was in Williamsburg, in the bottom of Brooklyn, and most of Williamsburg is owned by the Hasidic Jews,
Right.
and they're very private people. They don't let you photograph them. They've got their own lives, their own schools, their own buses, their own everything. They keep to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, to actually get someone to pose for a photograph, and I can talk most people around into being in a photograph for me. But these guys, you wouldn't waste your time. So I stood by that wall for probably an hour and a half, standing between two cars where no one could really see me, and pretending I was talking on the phone until the right people walked by, unbeknown that I was there. So, that you would call that contrived, but I like the repetition of shapes and the hat and the window, and it's just another little story about an image that means a lot to me that it possibly doesn't mean anything to anyone else, but that's the way it is.
Yeah, I really, the lighting on his face and the hat, it just really adds a lot. The background is nice, but the lighting was so nicely captured here. The exposure is just really spot on, and you can really appreciate. He's a nice-looking man. I mean, just I don't know what he's thinking about. Maybe just passing along, but you almost get a sense that he's thinking about something. And
his face tells a story, and it could be any story you want to make up.
Sure. And he's got a nice full beard, and it's a good. Interestingly, I see in the caption at the very top it says Bedford Avenue, Brooklyn, New York, and I actually lived on Bedford Avenue, but I'd say probably about 10 or 11 miles from that point. I was kind of going more in the other direction, away from the water.
The Bedford Ave is the longest road in New York.
It's one of the longest ones in Brooklyn for sure.
Yeah, it just goes forever. Yeah, I tried to walk the whole length once, but I didn't get a quarter of the way along.
I was over by Brooklyn College.
Yeah.
Cool. So have you taken other images of Hasidim, or is this just the one-off?
No, there's lots. You have to scroll quite a way back, but I like to hang in that area and just wait for something to happen. And first, I got lucky once. I was trying to be sneaky and not too intrusive, and waiting for the right people to walk past for another shot. And what happens certain days of the week, because of their you call it a religion or their custom, they're not allowed to turn anything electrical on.
That would be during the Sabbath. So that would be from sundown on Friday evening until sundown on Saturday.
Yeah. Anyway, one of these guys came up to me and talked, which is quite unusual. He said, "Please, can you come and help us?" And I said, "Of course I can." And he said, "We want you to come down into our house and turn a light switch on for us, or PowerPoint." So of course I did that, and I had to get on my hands and knees and climb under this table with a room full of strange-looking people I'd never seen before, and flick a PowerPoint on for them. It was quite bizarre.
Right.
And I thought it'd give me a few photographic opportunities, but nah.
One thing I'd like to propose here, and I think you'd be amenable to that, just for any listeners, that when you do go through the Instagram site and also Johnny's website, which we will put in the notes, Johnny, I'm sure you'd be amenable if any of the listeners and viewers of your images have a specific question or curiosity about some image of yours, they could contact you, and if you have time, you could probably engage with them a little bit about that.
Yep.
Okay.
No problem.
Sure. So,
Any email or direct message me on Instagram, one or the other.
right. So you heard it, folks. I mean, if there's a particular image that really appeals to you in some way and touches you in some way, you'd like to bounce that off of Johnnie, by all means, do so in a comment on Instagram or a direct message or via his email, which we'll list for his website. So just so you know that. Okay. So let's go on to the next image. What do you got for us?
Well, I'd like to change tact a bit,
Sure.
and I just had one before, which was photographing nudes. If you go down, there's a photograph of a nude lying in the roots of
Oh yeah. I love that image. Got it. I'm right there.
a fig tree. Over the years, I've photographed lots of nudes, not as a sexual object, but as an object to put within a background where there's more background than human. I did a series of aerial nudes, which sounds a bit weird, but it's photographing from a helicopter, from a bird's eye perspective,
Okay.
from at least 500 feet high with a longish lens, because I love the bird's eye perspective. And this particular shot of this beautiful girl who was a life model for art classes. I saw the roots of this tree because I climbed the tree, and I loved the shapes that the roots were creating, and I thought to myself, right, I'd like to put a nude in there, which is the way I shot a lot of my nudes. I'd find a location and think, right, what's cool about this shot? What's going to give it scale? So I had a lot of friends, that posed for me, or knew people from art classes that would pose, and I'd give them copies of the prints. In this particular shot, it was a really, really cold day.
Wow.
I had to climb this tree. It was 7 o'clock in the morning, and she came along with a boyfriend, and they were both wrapped up in rugs. And every time a car came past, he had to throw a rug over her so no one could see her. And you see the shape of the body sort of fits into the shapes formed by the roots of the tree. It's actually quite hard for the listeners to talk about an image if they can't see what I'm talking about. But
right. Well, we'll have the images available for the visual podcast that we do, so they'll be able to make a better connection that way.
Yeah.
Well, one thing too on the visual, which I happen to be looking at right now, as you're sharing, is interestingly almost directly below the model's pubic region or vagina in particular. There's a shape of the roots that actually looks kind of like a vagina and or a uterus. Right below, and so that's a perfect tie-in. I mean, there's the subliminal suggestion.
Yeah, I saw it as pre-birth.
Mm-hmm.
Like a woman about to give birth.
So it's kind of primordial, a little bit.
Yeah, well, those beautiful shapes and the beautiful moment. That's part of what I saw.
Right.
And sort of having the model lie in that way, which is the way a young child would be lying inside a womb.
Mm-hmm.
It sort of works quite well.
Yeah, it was very well conceived. And interesting, this one is rectangular. So this one.
It's shot out in the real camera.
Right. Okay. Yeah,
camera.
That's a really nice image. Mm-hmm. So I guess this was from 2013 is what it says.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, cold day. You're from the archives, yeah. So there's so much stuff to look at here, but so Mark, what other photographic questions do you want to fire at me?
Well, actually there's one image that I kind of like that's just above. Okay, so if we go from the nude, which is on the left side, and the row just above, there's a tiny airplane above her in the hand, and then right next to that, I'm guessing this is an Aboriginal fellow, maybe a homeless fellow with like a snake graphic above it.
That's an interesting story. Yeah, there's a part of Wellington called Newtown, which is a sort of lower socioeconomic area, which I like because the people are real. They're feet on the ground. They live more modestly, and this particular person, I'm not sure whether it's a he or a she, but I've always thought it's a she. So, I pass her on the street quite often when I'm walking into town, and I always say hello, and, we sort of established contact like that. And one day I couldn't help myself, and I stopped and asked her if she had time for me to take a photograph. And prior to me asking, I found a spot close to where she was sitting, which is only a couple hundred metres away, where that white line was on the wall. So I whipped around there, and she had a beanie on, so I got her to take a beanie off, and it was all over in about, probably only got half a dozen shots. But it's the same thing, finding a background that in some way complements what you're going to put into the shot, the person you're going to put into the shot, so it works.
Yeah, and you've got it framed very well too. Is that actually a snake graphic, or is it a wave, or just a random thing?
Just some graffiti guy's gone past with a spray can and buggered up someone's nice wall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it set up your shot very well, because it's almost like it just frames it very nicely, and it lends kind of a primitive element to it. I mean, it's just it's not something. Again, it adds a little bit of mystery, which is kind of nice. And
it gives it a mystery, and people think, what's going on here? And that's good. I like to get people thinking.
Yeah, it's kind of like the WTF factor, like, what exactly is going on. Sure.
Yeah.
So it draws people in. There's a hook. There's a hook in the show.
Yeah, and I mean, it could be negative thoughts or positive thoughts.
Doesn't
I don't
matter.
care as long as it's people thinking.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. So yeah, no, this is a nice image. So you mentioned doing some commercial work. You said you obviously had a lull with the current situation, but how long have you been doing corporate kind of work, and specifically with the iPhone?
Well, probably since I've been shooting on the iPhone since the advent of iPhones, but only in the last probably half a dozen years have I been taking it really seriously, because the quality's been getting better and better. And I direct a lot of my clients to my Instagram, or they can link to my Instagram through my website. But when I've got no work or nothing better to do, I'll flick emails to friends and colleagues. You might be designers or clients, and just keeping in touch. And I'll attach a couple of my most recent photographs, and quite often they say, "Man, how do you get that quality?" And I'll say, "I'll shoot on the iPhone, and this is how I get it to look like that." And this is how a few clients have said, "Right, I would like to commission you to to shoot some corporate stuff on the iPhone." Mm-hmm. And when you're doing portraits of these top executives that are used to the big flash cameras and the flashing lights and the assistants and the makeup artists and the this and that, and the photographer comes along with no camera except his iPhone in his pocket, and they say to me,
they're taking it back a little bit.
Yeah, why are you shooting on the iPhone? And I very politely say, well, why not? And you get them on board by showing them a few samples of what you've done, but also they are pre-warned that they're going to be photographed on the iPhone. But certainly people will react very differently when you point an iPhone at them versus a big flash camera and a tripod with lights and all the other paraphernalia that photographers have.
Yeah, a lot of those props and or tools are very distracting, in getting something, and also just kind of fussy. I mean, there's no way around it if you use the conventional tools and needing the lighting and the reflectors, et cetera, cables, all of that stuff. But there's something about just being able to walk up to someone and just break out the iPhone and get a killer shot, and then and before you even process it, just with the raw shot itself, show it to them, and they're just like, wow.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed, and this is interesting to me, because I mean I love animals. I'm not a lover of animal photos per se, but there are people that shoot animals in a very interesting way and really intrigue me, and you happen to be one of them. I really like a lot of the shots that you have with animals, and particularly horses. I think it seems to me you have a real love for the form of a horse.
I've got a real love for the form of any animal. I can't imagine. The two things in life that I can't imagine not having. One of them is music, and the other is animals, because animals are smarter than most humans give them credit for, and animals pick up on how you feel about them. I mean, it might sound a bit silly to some people, but I love being around animals. Your horses, cats, dogs, anything. I don't actually own an animal at the moment, so I take lots of pleasure in meeting other people's pets and animals and horses. And when I'm driving a long distance, I waste so much time stopping and talking to horses or climbing over a fence and photographing animals. But because any animal, like even if they're really shy, like some horses and particularly more cows or cattle, if you climb over the fence and sit down, mind your own business, they eventually all walk up and check you out, and they get right up to you, and that's when you get the opportunity to get these photographs that are slightly different.
Sure. Yeah, it's making me think back to some early Pink Floyd album covers.
Oh yeah.
So, so you mentioned animals, and you also mentioned music. So, just out of curiosity, what are some different kinds of music that have been on your playlist over the years? I mean, I
was brought up with classical music because my mum and dad were obviously classical people, and my dad played a bit of piano, and I played a little bit of guitar very badly. And I've got three kids. One son who's a very good musician who plays guitar and classical guitar and rock guitar, and he plays piano. And so I listen to all sorts of music. I haven't got one particular type of music that I like any more than the other. But there's always got to be music playing in your life somewhere, even if it's only in your head.
Right. Okay. So other than classical, were there any more popular forms of music or rock or?
I was into jazz and blues, and
Okay. So any particular jazz artists that you have a strong love for?
Oh God, you know what? Because you've asked me, I can't think of any.
Okay. And how about blues? Can you think of any blues musicians?
B.B. King, Freddie King.
You just name. I mean, once you get into the Kings, you can't. And how about the other King? Begins with an
Albert.
A. Albert. There you go.
Yeah, I know the Kings. I actually photographed B.B. King in a concert in London.
Did you?
It was cool. And then when he came to New Zealand, he was playing in the Wellington Town Hall. Might have been the other way around. I can't remember. But between shows, when in those days you could walk right up the stage, and me being a Scorpio, I'd get anywhere I wanted to go. So I got right up close and got some great pics of B.B. King playing Lucille, and I did some black and white prints. So when I saw him the next time, I managed to con my way backstage through a whole lot of different security checkups of these little packet of black and white prints, because I said I wanted to give them in person to B.B. King because I was such a fan. Must have been in London. And I got backstage after the gig and got to meet him and had a beer with him and gave him some prints. I kept the beer can for about 20 years, and he signed one of the prints for me, which I still got. So yeah, I've music's always with us.
Do you know what his name stands for? BB?
I should do, but no, I don't.
It's actually Blues Boy.
Oh, there you go then, eh?
Yeah, and so that was his nickname as a kid when he started playing. Here's that Blues Boy, Blues Boy King.
And I saw Freddie King in London.
Did
way
you?
Back.
I love Freddie King. I'd say of the three Kings, I probably love Freddie the most.
Nah, BB, mate. BB every time.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying I don't love BB. I mean, BB is one of the most distinctive sounds out of any guitarist, especially electric guitar. But I just happen to really love Freddie King's playing overall. I think Freddie King is basically Eric Clapton's daddy.
Okay, what was Freddie King's last album called? Here we go. It's a question for you.
I lose. I mean,
Madman Across the Water.
Madman Across the Water. Didn't Elton John have an album by that name?
No, we might have done, but maybe I got it wrong. But anyway, He was great.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, it just, Freddie just resonates with me. And I think probably in a lot of ways that, I don't know, my feeling is like Freddie's maybe the least known of the Three Kings. I mean, they're all great and they're all different, and I don't think they're related. Just, common name.
Yeah.
But,
interesting, eh?
Yeah.
Three Kings.
And I've shared some, in some of our back channel conversation, I've shared some music-related stuff. So it seems you have some awareness of punk and maybe...
Yeah.
So I mean, how about in the punk vein, or maybe 70s, 80s, that period of music? Anything stand out for you?
Oh, so much in there. Billy Bragg. Billy Bragg was later. It's not punk anyway.
Kind of punky folk.
Once again, I can't think of any now. Now you want me to?
Well, you knew about the Stiff Little Fingers. Were they a popular band for you?
Yeah, they were great too.
Yeah.
A lot of the English punk bands, which is really the home of punk,
like The Fall.
Yeah.
Gang of Four.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. The English had some good ones. That was kind of a special period. Okay, so now it made me think of a question, because sometimes I find myself going out to photograph, and for the most part, I'm more or less a street photographer, but not exclusively. But I'd say that's my main track. And so a lot of times when I'm out shooting, I don't listen to music. Okay, I want my eyes to listen to visual music. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I don't want to be distracted. I want my eyes to drink in things and draw me to something. Now, but when I go back and I process, sometimes, it'll just, maybe not be without some music. And other times I'll put music on and I feel that maybe the mood of the music affects me, how I process and how that flows. So do you have any kind of a process like that where you like to listen to music when you shoot, or don't, or like to listen to it in post?
I can just process it. I just process it. I don't keep this musical what. Quite often when I'm taking a shot, when I'm driving, I'll pull over the side of the road and I'll process it then and there. And because I like things to happen when they're.
Well, that's the beauty of the iPhone, because with the iPhone, I mean, I literally do that. When I was on holiday last week with my wife, a lot of times while she's getting ready to post her stuff on Facebook, I'm over there with Vistax and then not the one you just mentioned, Snapseed. I shoot in Vistax and do a filter, and then I go to Snapseed and get into the more granular stuff, and then and doing stuff like that. So that's the beauty too of shooting with the phone, how easy and quickly you can actually get things processed, and even up onto social media if that's what you want to do.
That's right. Boom, boom.
Yeah.
Instant.
Yeah.
That's the day. That's the times we live in, mate. Things got to happen now.
So, other than New Zealand, obviously you've traveled around some. So, how much you've done some photography in Europe? You mentioned England. You've also done some photography in the States, we know, because clearly you had a picture from New York. Did you do much traveling in the States other than the New York area?
Well, I've done work in the past, probably 10 years back now. A lot of my work used to be international. I've been to lots of places in America, and I've been very fortunate through my career to have lots of international travel to places that I would normally never have the opportunity to visit.
Did you visit the Southwest, like Arizona or New Mexico, down that way?
No, I haven't been. The closest I've been is that's close to Texas. So I've been in geography.
Texas is over that way. Yes.
Albuquerque and some of those places.
Albuquerque is in New Mexico.
Yeah, well, there you go. See, my geography is not that good in my memory for places I've been to, but I've been very fortunate. I've been to a lot of places doing work for clients that have given me the opportunity to take photographs of myself at the same time. So it's been a win-win.
Now,
travel.
Do any of your children participate in photography? I know you mentioned your son is a musician.
Yeah, I've got another son in New York who's a photographer doing very well. He shoots fashion. He lives in Williamsburg, and he's been there. He's been in New York now for probably 12 years.
So he's a bit of a hipster?
No, he's not a hipster really. He's just a very clever boy. He's
Okay,
very
Dad,
talented.
don't get all protective with me. No, where I was going with that is I'm from the old Brooklyn. Okay, before it was cool, it was just a place to be from. And then since I've been gone, had a renaissance of being kind of like the hipster capital, in particular Williamsburg, where you just mentioned. So that's why I went there. Nothing personal.
Williamsburg's great. It's sort of it's more alternative, and
Right.
you down downtown Manhattan is quite different. I
Oh,
can
it's
relate
changed a
to
lot. It
it.
used to be much cooler.
I can relate to anywhere in New York, but particularly places like Coney Island and
Oh, I love Coney Island.
Queens, Bronx, and Harlem, and all my experience around New York has been walking. I'd average 25 k's a day just
Of
walking.
course, there's tons of stuff to see. Do you know what
I
I used
know,
to
and
do when I was a kid?
if you go in the tube, you get different opportunities as well. But walking's a good way to see things.
See, as a kid in New York, I shot with my eyes only because at that time I didn't have a camera. But what I was doing was I would just wander around. I'd get sometimes like, maybe a bottle of wine, and just walk around with that. Take some sips along the way. Look at architecture. Look at people. Look at what they're wearing. Listen to how they sounded. All of this stuff. All this information, and it's intoxicating. Because New York it just never stops, and I mean it's just like one thing, that one thing after the next. So it's just like I realized that I was truly fortunate to have grown up in a city like that. I was also very fortunate to have a mom that allowed me to have some personal freedom because she felt that I demonstrated that I can, pretty much follow along to the rules that she laid down, and like when to come home, and if you're not, you better call, and that kind of thing. And I didn't abuse it because I realized I had special privileges that kids my age didn't have, and I just had the time of my life, and I'll never forget it.
That's right. It's an awesome part of the world. I go back most years. Very fortunate.
So what would you say about Wellington? I mean, I know Wellington is like a small city.
No, Wellington is the capital city.
Yeah, but compared to New York.
Oh, well, New York,
Or
anywhere in New
Tokyo.
Zealand's a baby compared to New York. But, Wellington is the bottom is the bottom end of the North Island, and it's the capital city. It's where Parliament sits, and it's right next to a bit of water between the North Island and the South Island, which is called Cook Strait. And the further south you get, the colder it gets. And Wellington picks up all the cold winds that come up from the south. So it's traditionally cold and windy. But it's awesome. It's a beautiful city. I mean, when you get good days in Wellington, it's one of the most beautiful cities in the world.
Mm-hmm. And so what would be the season then? It would.
You're lucky to stand up.
Well, give me the month, just because we'll get confused if we talk about seasons. Give me the month. What months would be ideal for Wellington?
Oh, anytime sort of mid to late summer.
Well, give me months because, like I said, we're going to get confused if we talk about seasons because we've got northern, southern hemisphere issues. So give me a month. So summer would be like now. No, summer would be like in December.
Middle of summer is sort of Christmas time.
Christmas time. There you go. Okay, so now we have a context for those of us from the northern hemisphere. Okay.
Yeah. You guys that live on the wrong side of the world.
Well, I mean, your toilets flow the wrong way. I mean, sorry to tell you that, but,
No, your hand basin's water goes out the plug the wrong way too.
All right. So we're getting into some of that Kiwi kind of stuff, aren't we? Listen, speaking of New Zealand in particular, we start out with Hori. Have you ever done specialized sessions where you focused on Maori culture specifically and shooting Maori?
So, what's the beginning part of that question?
Yeah. What I was asking you was, have you ever done any sessions or any series specifically on Maori people, visiting their villages and interacting with them? Have you ever done Maori focused photography?
Not as a series. My main series was the Home series, which that was a concentrated 3-year project, personal project, and that involved all sorts of different people. But no, I've never done a series of the just the Maori people.
So you don't have any shots of like during a haka ceremony or anything like that?
No, because a lot of it is just touristy stuff.
Right. I mean, it's been done a zillion times.
I mean, obviously, it could be done very, very beautifully, I'm sure, as it has been.
Right. Because I have a friend, that's in Hawaii, and his whole thing is focusing on the Hawaiian culture and doing a lot of shots that are done a zillion times, but in a way that they haven't been done, and you really feel the heart and soul of it, not just kind of a kitschy, oh, isn't that cute? Look at the Hawaiians being Hawaiian.
Mm.
So
you will see the bulk of that stuff you see is done for the tourists. That's
right.
Why.
Yeah. But that's why I asked, because I thought, if someone like you did it, you'd certainly elevate it, and you would certainly do it with a different take on it, and it would be interesting to me for that reason.
Yeah, well, everyone sees things differently, mate?
Sure. So we're almost at the end here. So anything in closing that you would like to share? We had talked. Were you thinking about possibly doing some training series? I think we talked about some seminars.
Yeah, I'm looking at trying to reinvent the wheel because commission work's dried up, and I was thinking of finding a way of imparting some of my knowledge for those that, if I can find people that are interested enough, but by whether it's some form of online tutorial or critiquing, or I'm not quite sure yet, but I've got a few ideas in mind, but at the moment, nothing's set in concrete.
So you're still kind of thinking through that, but in the meantime, if some people listening, some maybe photographers, whether they be beginners or even advanced ones, if they have an interest or they feel a connection with you, if they reached out to you, you can probably dialogue with them and figure out something to work with them within their goals and figure out a good mutual time.
And like in the next month or so, people keep an eye on my Instagram. I'll be starting to post a bit of stuff which will give people an indication of what direction I'm going to go.
Okay.
Whether it's tutorials or I'm not quite sure, but I want to. That's the direction I'd like to go, so I can reach out to people that way.
Sure.
That's my intention.
I think it'd be great. I mean, you've been at this for so long. You get so much passion for it. You've got such a creative eye and such an interesting take. I think a lot of people would really like to study and work with someone like you and get some help or just be challenged and have a mentor. So I think that'd be good.
That's what I'd like to be doing, because then I'm sort of giving something, but also I'm sort of being creative at the same time.
Sure. Okay.
Yes.
Well, listen, my friend.
Ideas. If anyone's got any ideas, let me know. I'm keen to learn.
Yeah, that's great. So everyone listening, you heard the man. If you have ideas or have a suggestion or a question, let him know and figure something out, and maybe you can work out, some kind of a training, tutorial kind of a thing, whether individual or for group. I'm sure Johnny's willing and able to do that. So
thank you, Mark. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, I mean, by all means, I think that's really a good fit. I mean, you certainly got the qualifications. It'd be a shame not to make the most of them. And there's a lot of people that are always like, wow, I wish I could find someone that's got that skill and that knowledge is actually willing to share and give input and teach. So why not? Win-win, right?
Yeah, well, that's my plan. So just check me out on the gram, and we'll all keep in touch. That's awesome.
Check them out on the gram, folks. You heard it here. Check them out on the gram.
Hey, thank you so much for asking me all these questions, and I hope I've been saying the right things. But it's just nice to chat.
Yeah, I've got you down for an A-. I'm hoping next time I get you up to an A+, but I've got you down for an A-. So you're doing pretty smashing.
All right, mate.
All right.
Thanks very much, Mark.
Yeah, well, it's been good, and thank you for sharing some of your time and joining us at A.Connector. And before we go, just so everyone knows that we will have another, in addition to the audio podcast, which will be up soon, we will have a visual one that will go out on YouTube, and I will let everyone know, and Johnny will put that maybe on his Instagram page for you to follow that, so you can both hear and also watch the show that has a lot of the images we're talking about and some other ones as well. So on that note, I will say thank you, Johnny, and thank you, folks, for listening, and you all have a good day.
Yeah, Mark, thanks very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, ta-ta.